in the sense of being a positive difference, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a range of things that I could probably enhance around that in a very, very practical sense to get people engaged and want, you know, feel as motivated to go and do their own piece in conjunction with it. So I've been thinking a lot more about making it more practical. One of the downsides was the room that it was in wasn't that big, and people sat down, which is fine. But the trouble is, once people sit down, it's really hard to get them out of the seat again. You know,
Yeah.
so I want to sort of get them standing up and get them doing things and sort of a bit more. You know, otherwise it just turns into like a lecture and a Q&A, which I didn't really want. But there's lots of things that I saw that worked really well and things that I could do better. So I've been thinking about how to do that. So
Okay. And which piece of antique did you bring along to the workshop?
4 pieces. So there was one of my very old chairs, so it's 210 years old. So I bought one of them along within the context of preservation. I bought one of the chairs from the Bellevue Hotel along as a demonstration around the context of conservation. I had a little piano stool that I brought along around the context of restoration. And I bought a ratty old chipboard bedside table along to demonstrate the context of renovation.
Rubbish. Oh, renovation. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
And also a bit of shock value because people are like, what are you going to do with that?
Yeah. Yes.
But it was also important in my view because I also wanted them to think about, well, don't just have a default mechanism where you throw it away, because I don't want people to throw stuff away.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, there's always a use for it, even if the use is sticking it in the garage and using it as a storage container, you know, so.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Or changing its use altogether, yeah.
Yeah, exactly right, yeah, yeah, so. It was an interesting group of people. There was probably 3 or 4 of them there who had their own businesses, so they were looking for ideas and tips and suggestions, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think over time that might be a piece that might even branch out onto its own a little bit, consistent with the sort of stuff that you and I've been talking about. There's going to be people coming along there who might have a particular skill or be artistic or whatever, and they'll want to learn a bit more about how they can maybe monetize their skill or talent.
Yeah.
So I think that might be one group. There was a guy there who had recently inherited an old table that needed some work. So he was there to solve a particular, a specific problem. And the others were just sort of keen, they were interested in it, and they were keen to learn more about it and, develop their own skills and knowledge in the area. So
Yeah, yeah. That's fantastic, eh? And you feel good about it? You feel good about the direction?
yeah, I do. But I've been very, very disciplined with myself because I don't want to just jump in and say, oh, well, here's some courses I can do to make some money out of, because that's not my motivation. And I've been really clear to myself about that. Is I'm really clear about, wanting to have an impact on people so that it does make a genuine difference, So, yeah. So, so that's important to me. And I think I need that discipline as well, because it would be very easy to sort of say, oh, this is good, I can make a few dollars out of this, but it's not, that may well happen, but that's not the reason I'm doing it, So,
Spot on. Absolutely. Yeah. Pleased about that. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the actual 3 hours of working and interacting, over and above what you said, some people sitting and they probably didn't interact as much as the ones standing and so on. But besides that, is it the way that you think that you would move forward? Or would you want sort of like a bigger room, everybody working with their own machinery on their own project?
Yeah, and I mean, I took stuff along there that I didn't actually even use, that I intended to use, that I didn't use, just like pieces of broken furniture and stuff like that. But yeah, I sort of, was thinking that the next time around, I might just say, okay, well, let's just talk about, how you might, strip a piece of wood. And then I'll just get them to take turns, or not necessarily take turns, but I'll get a couple of them to start doing it.
Yeah.
And then you can point out, so we'll see if you do it this way, this is going to happen. If you do it this way, this will happen. And it just makes it more hands-on, and I think a better learning environment, so.
Definitely. It's like in our classes, as soon as people start participating and offering comments or asking questions or making suggestions, immediately the ambience of the class changes. And it's far more constructive and energetic.
So I was sort of fairly disciplined in the sense that, like, when people would ask me a question, I wouldn't just jump in and answer it. I'd just sort of say to them, so what do you guys think?
Right, yes.
So what sort of suggestions have you guys got,
Right, excellent. And that felt good from your perspective?
Yeah, very much so, because I didn't want it to get into like a Q&A, and I kept on saying to them, like, this is an area where, there's not necessarily rights and wrongs per se, it's a matter of what's important for you, so you tell me what's important for you. Like, if you were doing this, what would you do? And what would you do? And what would you do? So.
Yeah. And people had different answers, or?
Yeah, absolutely did. Yeah.
That's great. That's fantastic. Yeah.
So the 3 hours was about right. But as I said, I think if I got them more involved in a practical sense, and that sort of next time around would probably mean not necessarily as many people there, but and a different sort of configuration in the room, then I think that would be even better, is my sense, so
yeah. So how did the company market this, and how did people respond? Did they fill out a form, or?
No, it was all mainly done through Facebook.
Okay.
So Facebook posts. They've got a fairly large following. I wouldn't say large in the sense, I think they've got about 50,000. And the feedback that they got through Facebook was, we want to see more of this, but we want to see it on YouTube because, I live in Perth or I live in Melbourne or wherever, and I can't come there. And so it was very positive in that sense from my perspective, that the interest is sort of, widespread. And I think the thing about that is that, modern technology enables you to do that. Maybe not in the same way, but, because they're not in the room with you. But at the same time, that if we're going to do a live stream, I need to think about what it is I do. And my sense is do something very practical in front of them, rather than just stand as a talking head sort of thing, so.
Yeah.
And probably keep it to, probably 45 minutes to an hour at the max sort of thing, and leave it at that. The other option, of course, is we could probably videotape a 3-hour session and then just edit it. I don't know.
Yeah. I think to make it effective, one needs to edit it. Okay.
Yeah.
And even put in a couple of subheadings or something.
Yeah.
In that process, and okay. Yeah, I understand the YouTube story. You see that, and also YouTube, it gets saved. So depending how they open the YouTube channel and so on, different things could be channeled under different headings.
Yeah.
As you move forward. So Yeah.
And I think the YouTube and the live streaming can be quite interactive. People can ask questions and make comments and all that sort of stuff. But you kind of almost need someone there to sort of manage that side of the process for you. It's a bit hard to be there.
Really, it isn't really an interactive on YouTube. Okay.
I think if you do a live stream one, it is. Yeah.
It's not ours. None of ours are interactive on YouTube. In fact, even on Facebook and on Get Set Up TV, there's no interactivity other than passing a comment in the comment section.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So yeah.
I know they've done other live streams where they invite people to ask questions as it's happening and all that sort of stuff. But yeah. But I think the trouble is that it can be more of a distraction than positive, because you can get people asking just stupid questions and stuff, and you're just thinking, oh God.
Yeah, what Get Set Up has done, they've got what they call a technical assistant that dormant, like it's just absolutely quiet and does. And then if people ask questions other than audio live, they just type it out. Then he or she collects them, and then there comes a time when let's call it the lecturer stops, and then he says, right, I've got these questions that have arrived, and then talks them through and eliminates anything that's rubbish, okay, that's clearly appropriate, and then they don't even come up.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea.
So that works quite well.
It's a good way to do it, because, as you say, it sort of filters it and keeps the flow of what you're doing going, rather than stop, start.
Yeah. Also, what Sue and I have done is we've gone back to the YouTube and looked at a class like we did this morning of shoulder exercises. Okay, and we listened to the recording, okay, as opposed to a live interaction, and then with every now and again we say, oh, do we need a rest? We just pause the video, you see, and then have a rest and then carry on. So it's quite good learning in that way through a video. So yeah,
that's true. Yeah.
And then the video can be taken to a website as well, you see. The company could have their company TV, if you like.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good idea. So how have you been going?
Yeah, I think all right. Yeah, I'm okay.
And I sense you've been fairly busy, have you? You've been fully occupied?
Yeah, I've still got to. I've submitted the 4 classes that start the beginning of next week, and I've just got to finish the content of the 4th one, and so they're ready, and then the purpose one drops away, thank goodness, eventually, and
why is that?
Because it was badly marketed on Get Set Up. Okay.
Okay.
So I think it was like the first time that somebody had offered a series of 5 consecutive classes. Okay. And it might have things might have changed now, because there are a lot of technicians working on it, or engineers they call them, working on it. But as I mentioned you before, that had the series name, and that would appear in front of all 5 classes. Okay. So there was no discrimination between the classes, except in the small print of the description. And 9 times out of 10, I think people, just look at the description and think, purpose, my purpose, definitely. It doesn't matter if it's class 1 or 5. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And so I had the second last class. Tomorrow is the last class. That's class 4. So yeah, otherwise the others have, you know, I'm doing a new one, which was Google Earth, virtual tour with Google Earth, teaching them how to use Google Earth, okay? As opposed to, there are other classes just taking people on tours for the fun of it. But I actually teach them how to use it, and so that's the purpose of my class. So I've moved to trying to get new content for each of those classes. So when they do, if they come in a second time or third or fourth time, yes, they're going to learn how to use it, but we go into a different part of the earth, and that then becomes interesting. So that works. I haven't done my first one with some of the others, so I want to do the changing of the content there as well. But it's not easy because there's a lot of research. I've got to refine my researching techniques and find things. I suppose I will as I move forward. If I'm dealing with science, and let's say the one is new science and technology, you know, we watched now just 10 minutes ago, whenever it was, 4 o'clock our time. We always watch to see the weather and the headline news if there's anything dramatic. But they showed a person that invented themselves a what can you call it now? This individual went sort of flying down the street about 12 foot off the ground, okay, with a hovercraft underneath him, about the size of a chair, the seat of a chair, okay. And he was like surfing as if you were on a surfing board. And, you know, he had these little helicopter propellers and things. So, you know, one looks at that and thinks, okay, now I must make a note of that. Where do I find that? That's something that could come in my science and technology class. So I've got to streamline my techniques of not only searching, but also storing that information. And because often I can't find my own storage. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that's where I'm at, and
you're still enjoying it?
Yeah, I am. You know, it becomes very disappointing when, you know, virtually nobody turns up to your class, or those that do turn up, you know, just don't put their microphones or videos on. So you're talking to a blank wall. And get set up, try and encourage people to, but you can't.
I think it's one of the traps of the age in which we live, isn't it? Because there's sort of a bit of a mindset that some people feel as if they need to be entertained.
Yeah.
And that's just this sort of passive watching from a distance type thing, you know. So
and I guess also, I mean, a lot of the times the people are still North Americans, and so a lot of our times are late. I mean, I had the opposite. I mean, I started at 7 a.m. this morning with a class, and that's roughly 7 p.m. on, let's say, the East Coast, and on the West Coast of America, it's maybe 5 or 6. Okay. Now, when I have a slot like that, and I've got one tomorrow as well, then I have numbers. I mean, this morning I had 22 in the class to watch, you know, the virtual tour. And then, you know, out of 22, you usually get, you know, 5 or 6 that'll have their cameras on and interacting, and that's all you need. Yeah, in fact, you just need maybe 2 at the worst to interact, and that's fine. So if you have 5 or 6, that's great. But anyway,
yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. So what else have you been up to?
Nothing really, nothing at all. Just preparing classes. And also starting, actually, yeah, we're starting to exercise now on a daily basis, as I mentioned to you earlier. Now, you know, previously we did ankle and you know, the foot exercises and things like that. This morning we did shoulder exercises, and so that's something new that now we're trying to do some of that every day.
Yeah.
I haven't got the. I'm really going to maybe even this evening start to get the mechanics of the Tai Chi, because you know, I want to see what it likes and see what it feels like to actually do Tai Chi.
Yeah.
Qigong for that matter, or whatever it's called, Qigong, as well.
Yeah. Mm.
So yeah, and I'm learning to make bread.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, yeah. We inherited a bread making machine, so
Okay.
we thought, well, we must see if it works.
It's one of my all-time favorite fragrances is the smell of fresh bread.
Yeah, lovely. We bought some ready mixed sourdough bread. Okay, and it's very vague in its flavor. So I'm still experimenting. It's on now at the moment. In the back, you probably hear that noise. That's the bread making machine, busy mashing up the dough. Yeah. Yeah. And you? And what's new on your side?
Yeah, there's a couple of things I've been doing a little bit of homework and a bit of investigation on. I've sort of, you know, with the writing of articles and blog posts and stuff like that, I was sort of looking at a way to try and enhance my productivity ratio compared to the time that I'm allocating to it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I came across this website. I'll send you the link later. They refer to it as, you might have even heard of it, they refer to it as a PLR website. And basically what it is there, and it's not just limited to like ebooks and articles and stuff like that. It has software and it has video content and all sorts of stuff. But basically what you're doing is when you, and it's something that you buy, but it's a very nominal figure. So say, for example, you wanted to sell, well, one thing that really piqued my attention was it was right up your alley, actually, was say you wanted to sell ebooks around the topic of, say, microgreens or growing your own, you know, nutritious herbs or whatever.
Yeah.
Along that line. Well, there's a whole bunch of pre-written ebooks and articles and that are very, very expensive. So you might be able to buy like a 54-page ebook written around, you know, for example, that topic or cryptocurrency or whatever, you know, whatever the topic. You know, there's a ton of topics there. So you might buy, say, a 54-page ebook around growing microgreens. And basically what you're doing is you're buying the rights to it. So the cost of the ebook to you, which is a licensed product, might be, say, $9.95. And that enables you then to resell it or give it away or package it up with something or whatever you like. So that basically you're buying the rights to that particular book. And some of them, they sell them as a package. So they'll also sell you marketing materials and images, supporting images and email templates and all of that sort of stuff as part of the package. And so the idea of it is that if you either don't have the time or you don't have the capability to write these books around the topic that you're interested in, in its barest form, what you can do is typically through a social media platform or something is sell it via like through a funnel type arrangement. So a 3-step process where you might promote it as a sponsored ad on, say, Facebook, for example. People click on it, it takes them to a landing page that you can set up through a third-party provider, and then people can buy it.
Mm.
And so you're just reselling this product, but you're selling it, your expertise is selling it to your audience,
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that you can sort of automate and that. So that's at one level you can do that. But where it interested me more so was particularly like articles and that. So there might only be like 2 or 3 page articles. So and this was just an experiment for me. So I was just sort of testing it. So I paid, I think it was $7 for 25 articles about antique chairs.
Right.
And I mean, the quality of the articles probably rank, in my opinion, but I'm fussy in that area, probably as a 4 to 5 out of 10.
Right.
But what I found useful about it is I could edit those articles and significantly improve them a heck of a lot faster than actually just writing the article.
From scratch, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're buying the rights to the articles, like there's no copyright issues or anything like that,
Yeah.
it's all, and it's quick and convenient, so I sort of thought, oh, well, I could, in an afternoon, I could have myself 25 articles written, which is almost like if you're doing one a day as an automatic upload onto your social media or on a blog or whatever. Well, that's like a month's work that you're knocking over pretty much in an afternoon, so.
Okay. So why would you want to create these articles?
Well, for me, it's always been about trying to get quality content which generates interest. So for me, it was sort of almost like as to hooks into the area that once people are in the area, they would explore it a bit more and help build an audience around these topics. So what my motivation was when I was looking at it was not about selling, but it was how do I get some of these messages to have more reach and cut through than I have been able to generate.
Okay.
So it's sort of coming from a sense of urgency to I've got to be more effective and more efficient as to how I get some of these core messages out there and build interest around and build action too, quite frankly, around some of these important issues around conservation, preservation.
Right. Right.
So that was my motivation.
So your motivation is to get that message out there.
Yeah.
It's not to sell some product or other.
No, not at all. And so sort of hot on the heels of your comment about your research methodology and your database and stuff like that. Well, hey presto, that's kind of what I've been, same sort of issue, I guess, but just a different take on it.
Yeah.
Try and make me more productive and more action oriented, I guess. And whether it translates to effectiveness, well, I guess we'll have to wait and see, so
Yeah.
But it had an appeal to me around that. I think the original motivation, for the creation of these websites and hence the material and the content that's in it, it's almost like a sort of a hybrid of Fiverr, but they're selling a finished product rather than a service, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But very inexpensive, and depending on what to do with it, it can be quite effective. I mean, and as I said, you know, like if someone was interested in trying to make a quick buck, well, I can sort of see how it would be very appealing to them, because if they pay, for example, $9.95 for an ebook, and if they're pretty good at selling or marketing, you know, they might be able to, even if they just sell that ebook again for $9.95, but if they sold 100 copies of it, then they're doing okay. You know?
Yeah. Okay, that's very interesting.
But it was an interesting topic, and as I said, I'll send you the link for the. Well, apparently there's quite a number of these websites. It was a new area for me that I sort of stumbled over.
Yeah.
But I thought I would. I think you'd find it interesting. It's almost had for me had the same sort of interest as when you sort of first time browsing through Fiverr, and you think you see all of these things that these people can do, and for very little money, you know. So, and you don't think too much at the time about the quality of what they're doing or how they do it or whatever. But the thing that appealed to me was, hey, look, you know, like people have done all the hard work. They've done a chunk of that sort of, you know, churn work, which enables me to edit it and polish it very, very quickly, you know.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
And the format that these articles were provided in, they weren't even in a Word document. They were just on like Microsoft Note, you know, like there was literally just text.
Okay, sure.
But for me, that was fantastic because, you know, if I develop my own templates in terms of the format, it's just
anywhere.
plug and paste, you know. So
Yeah.
So there's been that's sort of been of interest to me. And the other thing which has been of interest to me over the last week or so, and again, I sort of stumbled over it, is there's this website called, I think it's called Birchel, BIRCHEL.com.
Okay.
And basically what they market, it's like a crowdfunding marketplace. And what they market are environmental startups or existing businesses who are trying to crowdfund their next stage of development. So they're looking for investors, basically. And your investment can be small or as large as you want it to be. But again, the interesting thing for me, and this was an issue that I actually would like to talk to you about, is like there was one that sort of I found quite appealing for me because it was an alternative to styrofoam. So, you know, the styrofoam packaging and that.
Yeah.
It's a huge pollutant. But the alternative is basically just processed wool.
Okay.
So they can produce these big sort of sheets of processed wool in a format that you can package up things, and it's very, very effective in terms of thermal, properties, but also very safe, completely recyclable, non-toxic, completely flexible in terms of how you package things up and all that sort of stuff. So it had struck a lot of chords with me in terms of. So again, I decided to say, oh, well, there's one way to learn is just to jump in and have a look and see how that process works. So I put in an expression of interest about investing some money. The expressions of interest don't close until the end of this month. But as soon as you put your expression of interest in, the company that you've expressed the interest in opens up a dialogue with you, and they share with you a whole lot of information about their vision and their plans and what they would like to do and blah, 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 all that sort of stuff, and their technology and that. So I sort of thought, oh, well, this is a really open, transparent process. I'm enjoying it. I can see this. But a couple of the other ones, which I haven't sort of put any expression of interest in, mainly because I wasn't interested in what they were doing, but I thought it was fascinating in the sense that there were a couple of people there who had business proposals or business operations around natural medicines, so plant-based medicines.
Yeah.
And there was also another one there, which was like an agricultural proposal around vertical vegetable farming.
Okay.
But both of them left me with some doubts.
Yeah.
And I thought, I know who I can talk to about this. More about the idea rather than the process that I'd just been learning about.
Right.
So, like the vertical vegetable gardens one got me thinking, so in the sense that they're basically like planting up a wall, in effect. And I think it was hydroponics because I actually don't think the plants were in soil by the look of it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, they're not. They artificial light, which is good, and then grown with water and nutrients, but not in water. Okay.
Mm.
It's quite interesting. The roots hang freely in the ones that I've looked at,
Yeah.
and in the center of a city, you know, in a building in the center of the city.
Yeah, well, and that was a big part of their sort of marketing pitches, is the food production is very, very close to the market, you know,
Yeah.
so you overcome transport, you know, costs and all of those, and
Yeah.
energy consumption for transport and all of those sort of things.
Mm.
But the piece that had me wondering though is it seemed to be very much like a sort of a factory sort of mindset. But in terms of the energy value, not necessarily just the nutritional value, but the energy value of the plants that are grown in that sort of environment, is how do you think that they would be?
Yeah, it's a very good point that
You know, because I sort of think about when you see things like growing in a forest, it's quite clear that the energy within a forest is huge.
yeah.
And then you look at monoculture, you know, like acres and acres and acres of the same plant, like rhubarb or wheat or whatever.
Mm.
And you think, well, the energy value of that environment has to be quite weak.
Yeah.
You know, because the bit that was missing for me is that when you look at a vibrant, healthy plant, for example, maybe your back garden,
Mm.
the energy environment in that little microclimate is massive. You know, like you can sit there and you can just absorb it and feel happy and feel all of those really positive benefits out of being around it.
Right.
But you could also fill your backyard with all of the same plant
Mm.
stacked on top of each other. Do you think it would attract the birds? Do you think that the wildlife would come there? Do you think that you'd enjoy sitting out there? You know, so that was the big question mark I had in my mind.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of that questioning or the thinking came out of the book the audio book that you're reading about trees. Okay.
Well, partly that, but it even just had me thinking about, just from a pure health perspective,
Yeah.
is that, you know, I mean, you and I have sort of talked maybe around the topic a bit, around about, you know, the quality of the food that we eat.
Yeah.
And you often talk about, you know, nice organically grown food and that, well, that food grows up in a certain sort of micro environment, doesn't it? You know, which is more than just the sum of the soil, the sun, and the water. You know, so,
Right. Yeah.
you know, so and also, I was thinking, and I was thinking about your back garden. I mean, the amount of love and attention that, you know, that you and your wife put into that little space, you know, so
Yeah.
it has to have an impact on the health of those plants, you know. So
Oh, without a doubt, and the fact of also, you know, just going out there and talking to them or greeting them in the morning as well, I think just adds to that energy that you're referring to.
So I guess the bit that sort of had me wondering, you know, like,
The vertical gardens.
well, like say for example with the vertical gardens, yes, you can have the basic building blocks, which encourages, you know, well, it's almost like a chicken farm, isn't it? You know, with caged chickens, you know, you can produce a lot of eggs and maybe a lot of chicken meat, but is it healthy?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, or like a feedlot. Yes, you can grow a lot of cows, in a very small space. But are they healthy?
Yeah.
Is it ethical? You know, is it appropriate for us to treat life forms like that? You know, so there was all those sort of questions were running through my mind. You know, so.
Yeah. Which I think about a year ago, I remember telling you, it might have even been here in Australia, I don't know, but where they produced a piece of steak out of a test tube.
Yeah, I remember you telling me.
Yeah. So, you know, you think, okay, you're not killing an animal if that worries you, okay, to eat it. Okay. There are just so many things, so many angles from when you start thinking like you and I do. You think, well, which way is it? You know, and how important is eating? You see, that's a.
Well, I suppose one of the things that sort of probably influenced my thinking too, some years ago, you know, I did quite a lot of research around the idea of, or the label they had on it was called permaculture.
Yeah.
You know, so where it was about nothing goes to waste, you know, and everything has a purpose, and the sum of the parts is greater than you know, the individual constituents and all of that sort of thing, you know. And I'm just sort of thinking, so when they were sort of marketing, you know, there's like vertical garden technology as a healthy alternative, I'm thinking, well, is it really? Yes, it might. Yes, it might be efficient and economically healthy, but is it life sustaining? You know?
Yeah, they're really good questions because excuse me, when I do the microgreen class, I insist that you grow your microgreens in organic soil. Okay. But there are lots of alternatives. Okay, you can have all sorts of mats made out of coconut squash or hemp, but you've got to add nutrients to those. Okay, so that the plant has some nutrients. Now, to me, that defeats the object. Okay, because when it happens naturally in organic soil, what happens is not only do you get, let's say, vitamin A, B, C, D, E, K, but you also get the enzymes that help bring that to fruition in your microbiome. And so now all these little hardly measurable chemicals that are in those natural plants are not in the ones that you now feed through water or through the mats, okay, in order to, you know, show other than what's already in the seed, you know, the nutrients that are already in the seed. So, yeah, it's a cycle. And it's also about, you know, when you talk about artificial light, sure. But when chlorophyll in the leaves interact with the sunlight, now there's another bit of magic that takes place. See? And that's also part of the energy that you're referring to.
Well, it's so true, because I actually literally just finished that book yesterday about the hidden life of trees.
Yeah.
And he was actually talking about that, like the photosynthesis. And he said, have you ever wondered why trees are green? And he said, and the reason that they're green is just because the light that they absorb, you know, like the sunlight, it's the green range which the tree doesn't use.
Okay, interesting.
And he said, and there are some trees
that
will use the green range, but they won't use red, for example. And therefore, guess what? The leaves are red.
Right. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
It's fascinating, isn't it? When you think, because
it really is. Yeah. Yeah.
So the waste product for the tree is the green range in the light. And I thought to myself, well, that is so interesting, because I'd never even had the conscious awareness to ask the question, well, why are trees green?
That's right. Yeah. Any leaf, I guess, is probably the answer. Yeah. I mean, that would be a stupid question, wouldn't it? Yeah, that is so interesting.
Yeah. So it really got me thinking about, you know, and it comes back to the conversations that you and I have had, you know, forever. And it's really about, you know, well, what constitutes healthy?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a really important question, you know, it really is, you know, like medicine's definition of what healthy is versus, say, Moya's definition of what healthy is.
Yeah,
They probably wouldn't even use the same words.
yeah, 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 for sure. And constantly, because of the type of research that I used to do more than I do now, but still to a degree now when I'm researching herbs, particularly for my classes, you come across all sorts of information. And the one that I came across yesterday was, you know, the healthiest diet is a carnivorous diet. Okay. So, and the writer had all his reasons. Okay. And, so you think, you know, this is just keeps on turning around. People are asking these questions and then coming out as professionals, regardless whether this comment is totally the opposite to the next one. They've got their reasons and their science and their thing, but where does health actually start and end? Okay.
Well, one of the comments that came out of this book that sort of stuck with me a little bit is the idea of, or what he called was microclimates. He says, oh, you know, people sort of say, oh, this is a North American tree, or this is a, you know, an Eastern German tree, or whatever. He says, well, he said, all of that's nonsense. He says the definition of where a tree is and where it thrives is the microclimate that it enjoys. And that's not related to geographic boundaries or, you know, state borders or, you know, any of those sorts of things. No, that's true. So it's also got me thinking about, okay, well, what's the definition of healthy? And maybe the definition of healthy, you know, depends on, you know, how you're interacting in the environment that you're existing in, you know, so.
How is your individual micro environment?
Yeah.
Yes.
And that'll go to all sorts of things about the quality of the food, the exercise that you get, the stress that you bring upon yourself, you know, what you read, you know.
Yeah.
All of those factors are going to have an impact on your health, aren't they? You know, so.
Yeah, that is so interesting because again, recently with my microgreens class, I talk about, you know, you can't say that this seed is going to sprout within 3 days and that within 10 days you can harvest and so on and because you have a micro environment in which you are growing your greens. And I actually use that term. It's so interesting that you've brought it up. And I say, you know, your home, you might have the air conditioner on all day, or you might have the heater on all day, or you know, or you don't have anything on, and your window where you place it. That all creates a micro environment for growing your microgreens. And I'm saying the same thing now as I developed a class for herbs and a micro environment. And I don't know where I got that from, but it's true. And so what you're saying, you know, I can relate to. Yeah.
And I think about it when you think about, you know, and this wasn't in the book or anything like that, but, you know, I sort of think about our conversations when we talk about, you know, the other dimensions which make up part of who we are, and you know, all of those sorts of, you know, that whole tapestry in which we exist. And I'm sort of thinking, well, I think we do need to think about things differently and in a different way, no matter what we're talking about, whether it's talking about growing some microgreens or whether it's talking about our own spiritual development or whether it's about, you know, working out what my purpose is. You know, I think there's a whole tapestry there that we need to try and embrace to get to the bottom of that. I think we're too keen to overcomplicate and oversimplify at the same time.
Yeah. But you're talking about a microenvironment in
That's
which
exactly right.
each of us individually live within maybe 6 dimensions simultaneously.
Yeah.
And we're placing too much emphasis on one single aspect of the third dimension.
Mm, mm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, what came to my mind when I looked at this vertical vegetable farming technology. I thought to myself, they're missing something.
Yeah.
And perhaps it's still that hangover from the old consumerism. It's all about making money fast rather than selling highly nutritious, healthy vegetables, or not even selling them, producing highly nutritious, healthy vegetables in an environment which is just as good for the vegetables that are being grown as it is for those who consume them. So.
Yeah. I've been thinking, I haven't touched any research on it yet now, coming back to not only the microgreens, but the other class I'm doing now, which is potted herbs, is the soil that you use. Okay, now it is, by its nature, it's a monoculture, okay, because you got one herb in one pot. Okay. So my thought is now, what do I do with that soil? Because that particular plant is extracting certain things out, and I'm not aware at this stage that it's probably putting stuff back, but not related to what it's taking out. Okay, and so how do I revitalize the soil that's been sitting in a monoculture pot? Is I think people need to know that. I need to know it because I'm growing vegetables. So up to now,
I think there's also,
sorry?
Isn't there also a term about companion planting as well?
Yeah, companion planting is more in the garden itself. Okay, so yeah, I've done companion planting in South Africa, but no, I'm talking about now people, aged people who perhaps don't have a garden anymore, so they're going to grow their food in pots, or some of their food in pots, and up to now I've been turfing the soil into a drum, and I've been buying from Bunnings a soil enricher or something, organic, okay, and don't really know why. It just makes sense, and I do it, okay. But suddenly I started thinking now, using my own thing, why? Okay, why? What is correct? Is there not a more natural way? Maybe I could be growing other things in the same pot, possibly, as you say, and maybe you've sparked that idea of companion planting, but it also needs to extract things. And so I need to look into what the roots of plants do to organic soil and how they interact. Fulvic acid is so important in organic thing. It's so important in our lives. But if your soil is deprived of that, which basically it comes from a process of things becoming more organic, okay, decomposing and so on. So maybe I've got to take the soil and put it somewhere for a period of time so that it, maybe it can decompose. Maybe there is something that I can then take it from this particular plant and then immediately plant a different plant is going to put back that particular chemical.
I know a lot of the research they do about, the forest floor and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The health of the soil is very much determined by the life that lives in it. So worms and fungi and bacteria and all of those sorts of things. So maybe it's about, where's the opportunity for those sorts of elements to be put back into the soil as well. So like even something as simple as worms. So do you have a worm farm which deals with some of your vegetable scraps? you know, and that you can put some of the worm tea or even some of the spent, you know, soil that the worms live in
Mm.
back into the soils. I mean, I don't know. I'm just
So we're
speculating.
back to the sort of the concept of maybe a compost bin. Okay.
Compost bin and the
Yeah.
worm farm and all of those sorts of things, which are all elements that you would find in the natural environment, but you're just cultivating them separately and then combining them manually
Yeah,
or something.
I understand that. I actually introduced a worm farm to my daughters. She had a shared farm in South Africa
Mm.
in Natal, and I came and spent a few weeks there and introduced worm farming to them. And as far as I know, it's still going. I don't know, but
I've got one here.
have you?
Yeah, I just put all of my vegetable, you know, peelings and stuff like that into it, and I water it once a week. I put 2 liters of water through it once a week, which generates a whole lot of what they call it worm tea, which I just put onto my vegetable patch.
Right.
You know, and the vegetables just jump out of the ground when you put it on there. So
Okay. Yeah. Um, so it's what is it? A drum with a tap on the bottom.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And then
it's got
how
it's
do you
got two
take?
levels. It's got 2 levels in it, and or
Oh,
three levels or something. Yeah, so you just put the vegetable peelings on the top, and then cover it with a bit of newspaper or you know whatever you like,
mm,
and just keep it moist, not wet, but just moist.
yeah.
And the worms just, I mean, there's certain stuff you can't put in there. They don't like citrus, and they tend to not like onions and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But in terms of like you know carrots and greens or any of that sort of stuff, they just gulp it down.
Okay. Okay.
Mm.
But you don't take out any soil from that.
Well, I do in the sense that when it gets full, you know, like they've eaten everything
Yeah.
and it gets full, then you take a tray off and then you get the worms out of it and some soil and you put them into the next tray and then the leftover, you know, worm tailings or whatever they call them, I just put into my garden, dig it into my garden, you know. So
Yeah. So that could work with pots as well then.
mm,
What is
mm,
soil? Um,
mm. Both
anyway, it's
both
pot
the
research.
tea
Yeah.
and that. Yeah, so and it's all natural, of course. So yeah.
Yeah. It's important for me because I've thought of it now um, and that I'm teaching it. I really need to make sure that I'm communicating authentically with what
I
people.
think so too. And I guess the bit that sort of struck me is, and again, the trigger was this vertical vegetable farm. I kept on saying to myself, something's missing. Something's missing. Like
Yeah.
they've missed something really important here. You know, like
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
it might be very economically efficient, and yes, it might get a lot of produce and stuff. But I still think they've missed something. You know, it just doesn't feel right. You know, so
Yeah, yeah. And do you put your worm bin? Because I used to put when this farm I put it, it was always under a tree. Do you put it in the full sun?
no, no, it's
Uh,
just out on my front patio beside all of the pot plants.
so it doesn't get sun at all then.
No,
It does. Yeah,
not direct sun. No, no.
yeah. That was that I can remember as well, and that's fine because and I have difficulty in finding a space here with sun.
Yeah.
In winter, we just don't have any sun on the garden at all in winter.
Mm,
Uh, And then summer, we have a hell of a hot garden. So,
mm,
yeah, but we're adapting our little ecosystem here that caters for that now.
mm. And I think that's a really important point that you just make there because the health of the garden is probably around its ability to adapt. So adapt to little light in winter and blistering heat in summer. That's
Yeah,
a very adaptable microclimate, well, a very adaptable plant life in that microclimate, isn't it? You know, and
yeah,
that's obviously healthy. You know that
yeah,
they
yeah,
not
yeah,
only just survive, they thrive. You know, so
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I was next to the lavender plant today in a pot. Okay, and it's probably the only sort of with any mass application, not application. I want bees to come into the garden, okay, and I'm not getting bees this last summer, except around the lavender, okay. They came in, and so that's another thing. I feel that the ecosystem, there are bees obviously in the vicinity because the lavender attracts some of them. But what else? Because a lot of the Australian natural type plants that I've got in the garden, are not attracting the bees. Other flowers are attracting certain types of birds, but not the bees. So it's something that I also want to look at as part of moving forward. So yeah, there are things that I suppose keep me occupied and keep my mind occupied.
But I just think it's fascinating because it's just that increased awareness too, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It definitely increased awareness. Suddenly from the greens and the health of the greens to the soil. Yeah. And in your case, very different when you're looking at your antiques and how you're going to do your classes and what you're going to communicate and how you're going to share and how that's going to influence people.
And it also goes to a lot of those sort of social factors in one sense. Like there was an article, ironically, in I think it was in one of the mass media, and it was just like an article of interest, but it was saying some of the finest furniture ever built in Australia, i.e. like an antique style, was built by convicts.
Convicts? Okay.
And I guess that shouldn't surprise us because I suppose in the early settlements, a couple of 100 years ago, a bit longer than that now, the labour were basically convicts, weren't they?
Yeah, free labour.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas in contrast to England, for example, the fine furniture builders were the ones that had the royal seal of approval.
Yeah. Have you ever thought of, or have you ever designed your own chair and built it based on you?
No, I haven't, but I have started to think about, design and that sort of thing. Yeah, definitely have. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that would be interesting to see what comes out of that process. Yeah.
It's sort of interesting. I think we've sort of spoken about it a little bit too, but like beautiful things are sort of disappearing from modern manufacturing.
Yeah.
Because it's all about time and cost and profit, and I think it's a tragedy,
Yeah, I agree. And it also, and I wonder how that influences, because a lot of things in the manufacturing environment are done by robots.
Well, they are now. That's right. Exactly right. Yeah. So and I keep on coming back to sort of things like, like a well-prepared meal, not only is it about the ingredients, but it's about, the love and the attention that the chef puts into that, the person cooking that food puts into it, so, and you can taste the difference,
Yeah, definitely.
So the same idea must apply to, well, a lady that I used to do business coaching with. She does painted furniture like that sort of Hampton style and shabby chic and that. And she always used to argue black and blue, not to me so much, but with others, that the energy that the furniture gives off depends on how much your hands are involved in the remaking of it.
Beautiful.
So her view is that if you use a spray gun, like a spray painter, that it'll have nowhere near the impact or the look and the feel than as if you do it by hand.
Yeah. Fantastic. I so want to agree with that. Yeah. So interesting.
It is. So there's lots of interesting things there to think about.
Yeah. But it's interesting that our thinking is moving in this type of direction. It's also very interesting.
Well, it is, you know, and I was fascinated to even just look at, you know, like these ethical investments and that, and thinking, okay, well, what are people doing? What's the big movers in that area, you know? So, and yeah, I was fascinated. A lot of it does go to, you know, food production and energy production and stuff like that. But then there was this other one, you know, like where they just said, oh, well, our vision is to have a replacement for styrofoam packaging, you know. And I thought, well, that's fantastic.
You know, I might have mentioned this to you before, but before we left South Africa, one of the I don't know, call them, it's like a McDonald's, okay, but it wasn't McDonald's. One of these food places, they were making replacing the styrofoam with edible boxes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was made from corn, okay, and they marketed it that you know, you can now, you know, eat your burger and eat the box. Okay, yeah, thanks. You put that in the chat page, did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, it reminded me, like the first time I went to Canada, there was a sort of a fast food outlet, and they used to sell bowls of soup, but the bowl was just crusty bread, like a crusty bread roll. And what they would do is they would just cut the top out and fill it with soup.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, but yeah, so they, you know, I don't know if they're still doing it or whatever, but we certainly tried it, and it wasn't untasty by any means. You know, it was fine. And I thought at the time, wow, well, that's really interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so I think there's lots of opportunities for, you know, the development of creative solutions. You know, the word creative comes up again, doesn't it? You know, so
yeah. So
and I think a lot of the resistance to change is not necessarily from the consumer. I think it's, you know, whole industries are built up around, you know, making sure that we have lots of plastic packaging.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway. So yeah, that's what I've been doing.
That's great. We're both doing quite a lot now. It's great.
It is. No, it's really good.
Yeah. Really good. Probably a good place to stop, I guess, eh?
Yeah, it is, I think. Yeah, so it is. I was going to ask you, so will you be around on this Sunday, or are we going to do the that other group again?
No, I didn't do the group last Sunday. I did. It was Father's Day in the.
Yeah, I remember you saying. Yeah.
Okay. So so funny. One of my children in London, who's living with his girlfriends from New Zealand, he was the only one that wasn't that wished me. It didn't wish me Happy Father's Day. You see. So I thought, okay, he clearly forgot. You see. So joking last night, we were interacting. You know, he sent me a message, how am I, and so on. I said, yeah, okay. I'm recovering from not hearing from you on Father's Day, you see. And he said, but Father's Day is in September, Dad. Ash, which is his wife, says, yeah, Ash tells me it's in September. What do you mean now? So I get 2 Father's Days.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay. Well, definitely let's talk on Sunday again.
Okay. Sounds great.
Great. And we move from there. All right.
Okay. Take care.
Cheers. You too. Bye.